You've had the weekend to watch all of Season 5 of Cobra Kai, so today we're going to stop and rank all 10 episodes from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all 10 episodes of Season 5 of Cobra Kai. This is a spoiler video. I will be talking about all the details. This is my equivalent of a spoiler review for this season, so feel free to spoil away down below in the comment section, and if you haven't watched the season yet, you have been warned. With that said, let's get started. In last place, episode 1, Long Way Home. For me, the season kicked off pretty dull, and the reason for that is they just ended the last season in a place where it meant they just had to do a lot of rebuilding for the story to kind of kick in for the next season, in which case you have Daniel disbanding Miyagi-Do.
As of today, I am shutting down Miyagi-Do Karate.
Partnering up with Chosen to go after Terry Silver. But not a lot actually happens there. It's just kind of like, okay, now we know what they're planning to do, but they're not quite doing it yet. Ends with a nice kind of cliffhanger there of Chosen going undercover, but this is kind of a nice cliffhanger. Then you have Miguel going to Mexico, hunting down his father, and they have to have conflict there, show that he's in danger, set up the scenario where Johnny can show up to save the day. But what that ends up being is just kind of like these throwaway conflicts that don't really mean much. Some Australians take advantage of him, try and scam him, or do scam him. Then he meets someone that's not his father. And so it's just stuff that doesn't actually matter. It's just kind of distractions filling the time so that he doesn't just immediately find his dad. And when he does, there's kind of nice little notes to where there might be hope there, but it's not interesting quite yet. And then you have the Johnny plot line where it just kicks off immediately. He's taken Robbie with him on a road trip, but didn't tell him what the road trip is for. And because their relationship has been so strained for 4 seasons, it just feels awkward to just immediately have them on a road trip kind of joking and having a good time, and their car breaks down. And so it just kind of felt kind of empty, like, wait, we're already buddies after all the trauma of the past? And it was fun to have Johnny beating up the scammers and Robbie joining in. That was kind of fun. But otherwise, just kind of a soft way to kick off a season. Number 9, episode 4, Downward Spiral. And for me, one of the 3 plot lines worked pretty well and the other 2 weren't so great. On the positive side, really dug the Johnny stuff. This episode kicks off with Carmen's dream about Johnny that's very Top Gun heavy, kind of mirroring when he had a dream about her a few seasons back. Very fun cold open to the episode. Absolutely loved that. And then you get some of the most fun Johnny stuff that we get this whole season, where he decides to be an Uber driver and he's just as Johnny as you would expect.
1 star because the car smelled like beer. It's because there is beer, asshole.
All kind of leading up to the point in time where he meets up with the pawn shop owner that they've always had that back and forth relationship between the two of them. And that guy kind of gives him some advice about, I hate this job, but it goes home to the life that I actually love. I get to deal with jerks like you all day, so I get to have fun with my kids at home. And so you have that maturing journey of Johnny taking place that was one of the better aspects of this season that really worked for me, is that he's actually overcoming all the crap that he's had for the last 35 years. But then the other 2 plot lines I wasn't as crazy about. So we're in episode 4 of the season. You have to finally do something with the teenagers, but what they do just kind of feels like this kind of surface level filler conflict where they're all at the water park on the exact same day and they're battling over which side they're going to be at. And there's some conversations in there that are kind of important between some of the characters, with Robbie talking with Tori and things like that. But all of it culminates in a water slide race that makes absolutely no sense because they're not on the same slides and you can't control how fast you go down a slide, really. So it's like, it didn't make any sense to me, even the way they're competing for the water park and then they cheat by popping it. It just felt like some of the weaker tension between teenager stuff in this entire series for me. And like, they just had to have something there, like, let's do it at a water park. And finally you get to the Daniel stuff where they go to this auction and Terry Silver's messing with him, and Terry Silver's getting into Daniel's mind because he'd already burned down Mike Barnes' furniture store and messed with him in the sauna in the previous episode. So Daniel's just overreacting to everything. And to me, it was just Daniel being just too stupid, overreacting too much, playing into it. And that's kind of the way that he's always been, but at some point in time he needs to learn and grow. This whole episode is Johnny learning and growing, but Daniel's just as stupid as ever. And then once again at the end of the episode, Amanda's like, this is too far, you gotta stop. And it just felt like we're rehashing a lot of the same stuff we've seen throughout the show. So it was a little bit more dramatic with her actually choosing to leave, but because it was just like a one episode thing, even that felt empty. So all the conflict of this episode just kind of felt pretty cheap in light of where the season ended up going. So one of the weaker episodes. Next up, episode 7, Bad Eggs. And one of the interesting things about this one kind of being lower on the list is one of the things that frustrated me about this season is there isn't as much of a focus on the mentoring of the teenagers in this season. And this episode is primarily about the mentoring. But because the season isn't focused on that as the goal for the season, it just kind of felt a little bit like a filler type episode. So you have Chosen training the Miyagi-Do Eagle Fang students, kind of doing this egg analogy, and it's a fun little bit. And it's nice to see Chosen as this blend of Johnny and Daniel and everything that he does and the teenagers learning. It's nice to see. It was kind of fun. And then, of course, they use it in the finale. So that was a nice little touch. But because it wasn't part of it doesn't have like a big payoff moment as part of that in the episode itself. Then on the Cobra Kai side, you have them trying to figure out who the leaders are. And it was kind of nice to have Kenny defeating Kyler. But because the season's not really about Kenny's redemption or anything like that, once again, it's like a nice little moment to see Kenny being better than Kyler because you just don't like Kyler at all. There's not much more to it than that. A little bit of bonding between Tori and Devin. It was kind of nice. And the big thing here was Daniel and Johnny going to go see Kreese to learn the master plan. And you get some flashbacks kind of learning about the dynamic between Kreese and Silver back in the early days of Cobra Kai when Kreese was training Johnny. And the big, great moment of the episode is after Kreese reveals the master plan that Daniel ended up cheating him and gives him the note. That was a great final moment for the episode. Just in general, kind of like, okay, that was nice. That was kind of saw a few things, nice little training. None of that big flashy stuff that I love about the show. Number 7, episode 9, Survivors. And to me, this is a solid setup episode. It's the one that's designed to move all the pieces so that you can have a finale that's all payoff. And it's effective enough at doing that. So on one plot line, you have Johnny with Carmen going to the hospital and finding out baby's healthy and they can tell people about it. So you have that nice reveal where they tell Daniel, everyone's happy. And one of the things that's really satisfying about this aspect of it is that when you had 4 seasons of like constant conflict between Johnny and Daniel, and now they're legitimately turning into friends, celebrating life together. So that was just like a nice little touch. And so they go out to party, and even Louie's joining in on the fun and having joining in on everything kind of going on. And so they go out to this club. Nice little touch in here. I didn't realize this until this past week, but Louie's sister that's dating the coworker at the club, that's Ralph Macchio's daughter, the therapist, counselor, cousin that joined in the analysis a couple seasons back. That's Ralph Macchio's daughter. Nice little touch that kind of gives new layers to those interactions. But it's kind of nice to see them happy, enjoying life. And they give Chosen just a little bit more personality and a little bit of a backstory there of like he has his love for Kimiko, and they kind of have that phone call. Real nice little touches. And then at the end, of course, they're rocking out to Eye of the Tiger as someone that absolutely loves the Rocky franchise. Of course, that puts a big, gigantic grin on my face. And then kind of other strands kind of going on here. You have the teenagers trying to figure out what they're going to kind of do about everything. And so Tori tells Sam the truth. Sam does not receive this information well. Tori goes and meets up with the Cobra Kai people who are basically torturing her at this point in time, giving her the full Silver treatment, making her knuckles bleed and everything like that. So when Sam goes to visit her, she like finally softens towards Tori after all these seasons. Us as the audience could soften on her a season or 2 back. Finally, Sam joins in on that, and they try to devise their plan to kind of track things down. And so it was like nice to see things move around, have some of those relationships kind of resolved a little bit. And, you know, having that cliffhanger of the adults being kidnapped, nice little touch. At the same time, once again, it's a setup episode. It moves the pieces. It's not the one that's like, oh man, that was awesome. It does its job well, but there's limitations when you're doing a setup episode. Number 6, episode 3, Playing with Fire. And of all the episodes this season, this is the one that was the most difficult for me to place, because there's a bunch of things in here that I loved. There's some massive revelations, twists, turns that dramatically shift where characters are at. And also I felt it had some of the, I don't know, lazier writing. And given how cool some of the stuff in this episode is, it's in particular very frustrating when those are the episodes where I'm like, really? That's how you kind of handled that? So what do I mean by all of that? Well, let's kind of walk through the least interesting plot line. Sam goes to a spa. She goes into an 11 from Stranger Things deprivation tank to have visions, goes full 11 mode and is seeing people. And, you know, in this particular episode, given everything else that happens, not really interesting at all. It's just kind of there. She has some realizations. Okay, whatever. It needed to happen. Let's move on to more interesting stuff. Johnny learns that Carmen might be pregnant, kind of freaks out a little bit, and then goes into full-blown work mode and trying to fix things. And I felt like the way they handled Carmen's response to him being a little weirded out rang a little bit hollow. Like literally as I was watching it with my wife, my wife goes, really? This is how she's responding to him? They have a very surprised event. People act weird in those moments. It's a very big information when you discover that someone's pregnant and you weren't planning on that. And so the way she responds didn't seem entirely reasonable to me. And then, you know, of course he goes into like, Johnny's in this transformative state of his life trying to figure things out. So he like radically shifts his home to try and win her over. And so it's a nice payoff by the end of it, but felt a little bit melodrama, overreaction, the way she kind of handled it given the surprise nature of the revelation. And the big one that had me all sorts of torn was the Mike Barnes stuff. So I've been watching the original Karate Kid 3 for over 30 years now. And the idea of seeing Mike Barnes, where is he at 30 years later? That is so fun and exciting. And in the way they handled it of him being this guy has a totally normal life. And he's like, man, I've thought about reaching out, but I didn't want to trigger you. Why dredge up the past? Man, I was such a jerk. Of everyone in the world, all the people on the earth, you're the one person that does not owe me an apology.
Look, man, I'm so sorry for the things that I said back in the day, the things that I did. Man, I have wanted to apologize to you so many times.
And it just rang true. And it highlighted one of the things that I don't think was has become very clear and obvious during this season, is that the way the writers have chosen to handle the legacy characters from the original trilogy is that the people that were youthful as villains in the original trilogy of films, they don't hold that against them. They realize that there are people that were swayed by mentors that led them astray. So Chosen, his uncle, Johnny, Kreese, Barnes, Silver, and that was their youthful immaturity leading them to bad places. And so those people all grow up to be better people, wanting to be better people. And it is the people that were grown-ups in the original trilogy that chose to exploit children that are handled as villains currently. It's like really cool, interesting stuff. And that Barnes thing is really what's sort of like, oh, it's kind of interesting, their perspective on who is and isn't culpable for what they did 35 years ago. But then they play out this stuff where, once again, Daniel's too stupid. And he's like, Barnes is a villain. What is Barnes up to? He's on some underground crime ring. Like, really? You think that because 35 years ago when he was a teenager, like it's the under 18 All Valley. So when he was literally underage, he was a jerk being exploited by a billionaire guy? And you think he's an underground criminal now? And then Chosen literally charges in, starts beating people up. He assaulted his employees, and it's kind of played for laughs. It was like, like, you think, where's that line of too far? For me, that crosses the line. This is an episode that I want to have higher up on this list because, like, seeing Barnes the catch up, I loved where he's at in those interactions. Johnny, that stuff was so cool, but I was just like, really, I know you have to have fights in the show, but Chosen is beating up innocent people that just work at a warehouse. And then it ends with Silver burning down Barnes's place. And in the season, there's no criminal investigation. There's no something that just goes so far into felony category where it's really easy to like point fingers like, yeah, we had this conversation. That guy we know is evil. He probably did this. And there's no investigation. So an episode I want to have way higher up there because I love that there's so much in it, but I can't. Number 5, episode 5, Extreme Measures. A really solid mid-tier episode that progresses multiple plot lines in a satisfying way. So Daniel is now more desperate than ever to stop Silver as his wife has left him. Everything's on the line, and someone slips him a note, giving him a hint that Stingray is lying about what's going on. And kind of crazy Daniel, trying to figure all this out, goes and confronts Stingray, assaults him a little bit, and it's kind of going a little bit bananas because of everything going on. And at the same time, you have Johnny, who this whole season is trying to get Miguel and Robbie to get along, but adding to that, now he knows they're going to be a family. And so he absolutely is trying to reconcile them. And so he's taking them to Olive Garden to talk it out. He's trying to do an escape room so they do something fun together. Just like fun little Johnny moments. And in the midst of all of this, Daniel shows up at Johnny's place, crazy as can be. And you reach this kind of moment in time where stable Daniel has become the crazy one. And as Daniel's trying to provoke him into action, Johnny is the voice of reason. And just kind of this nice reversal where you see how Silver can pull the worst out of Daniel, and Johnny's on this journey of actually maturing and becoming the best version of himself. And each of them can kind of give each other wisdom to make better, wiser choices as with everything kind of going on. This is like really satisfying as that kind of happens. So that leads to Johnny coming up with the great idea to have Miguel and Robbie just beat the crap out of each other, since that's the worldview of this show, that fights resolve problems. They have a big fight, and by the end of it, and once they've thrown enough punches, both of them kind of reach that moment where they're like vulnerable enough to say what they're really thinking and start to resolve things. And then Johnny accidentally lets it slip that they're having a baby, and it's just like has a real nice satisfying moment of these characters that have been at odds the entire show up to this point in time finally have worked through it, and there's a new thing that they're all excited about together. That's just really satisfying. And other thing kind of going on in here, Daniel goes to apologize to Stingray, and it's another one of Silver's traps, and Silver just beats the crap out of Daniel and leaves him there like, I'm gonna make you pay for all of this. Classic Silver fashion. And our other fun plot line in here is that Amanda goes off and to see her family, and the big revelation here is that Robin Lively, Blake Lively's sister from Karate Kid 3, is actually the way that Daniel met his wife, and they're cousins. And through kind of that perspective, she's like, oh, Silver, yeah, that guy's bad. And Amanda finally really starts to kind of like get it, like, this guy's actually next level evil. This isn't just Daniel's obsession. This is a crazy man that is dangerous. So she kind of comes around. So you kind of hit that midpoint of the season, and you kind of resolve some multiple season-long arcs and set up the final little batch here of everyone's going to kind of come together. Even Johnny's going to join in to try and stop Silver, and Amanda's on board with it. And there's just something satisfying about it. Next up, episode 2, Mole. And generally speaking, I feel like the first 4 episodes of this season were pretty weak. And I said in my non-spoiler review that I thought the season was unfocused, had too many plot lines, and was pretty uneven. A lot of that is referring to these first 4 episodes and them trying to kind of balance things from where the previous season ended, setting things up, and kind of getting on path. And I think the one big exception to that is episode 2, that just has a bunch of really cool stuff in it and emotional moments as well. And so Main one, title of the episode is Mole, and so you have Chosen going undercover at Cobra Kai, and you just get a bunch of great moments with Chosen, Terry Silver, setting up the dynamic between the two of them that will be paid off so well in the finale. But you just gotta really get to understand Terry Silver a little bit better and how much he really believes in what he's doing. As evil as he is, you kind of get to see Chosen front and center, not just as a character responding to Daniel, but an episode where he's on his own plot, driving it. And he became one of the standouts of the season because he can be really funny as this very strong character, does a lot of fish out of water stuff where he says wacky stuff, but also as someone that is so dedicated to the cause. He's going undercover. So it's great dynamics between the two of them, all leading up to the section at the end where Silver figures out what's going on, sends all the senseis to beat him up, and you see Chosen just destroy all of these guys, threaten Terry Silver, once again, setting up that rivalry that goes all the way to the end of the season, and also getting Terry Silver to realize he has to go all out in recruiting his senseis if he's going to destroy Chosen and Miyagi-Do. So it's a really nice little plot line. But the one that has all the emotion to it is you get the good stuff with Miguel and his Mexico adventure, where he spends a whole episode with his father. And at first, his interpretation is, my mother cheated me out of having a father all this time. And even as he's just horrifying phone calls to his mother, like just yelling at her, like, how could you do this? How could you take him away from me? All of it leading to the realization his father really was a bad dude, a really bad guy. And he runs off crying, only for Johnny to show up right at that moment. And for him to realize, I do have a dad. And fathers aren't always biological. They're not always legally dads, but father figures can come in a lot of different places. And he has that realization, like, okay, I don't need this guy that is a really bad person that was horrible to my mother and is telling me horrible things. I have this guy over here, which works so well with where the season is going. And it works in the moment of just really powerful, emotional to see Miguel respond that way to Johnny coming to rescue him. But when you realize how much more so they're becoming a real family, and they're gonna have a brother he's legitimately a father figure in his life, it's even more impactful with where everything else is going. Real quick, before I give you my top 3 episodes, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the Cobra Kai Season 5 episodes, and feel free to spoil away. This is a spoiler review, spoiler ranking of the episodes, so let me know your thoughts down below and all the specifics as well. Also, if you enjoy this content, I've done a bunch of other Cobra Kai content, and I've got more coming in the near future. You can check out my other rankings, reviews, all that fun stuff right in there. I got the Karate Kid movies, I got the seasons ranked, and tomorrow I'm going to update my character ranking, so be sure to come back tomorrow to check that one out. In third place, episode 6, Uruburus, and this to me was just a really satisfying, emotional episode. After the events of the previous episode, Daniel has kind of totally lost his way. Silver has physically broken him, but more importantly, he's broken his spirit, and he's ready to throw in the towel, right as everyone else is kind of coming in to say, like, no, man, we are here for you. Johnny's decided, I need to join the fight. Chosen is more motivated than ever, seeing what Silver has physically done to Daniel, and Amanda's come back from her trip like, I get it. I get it. You have to stop this person. And so everyone is coming to him right as he has just lost all of his will to fight Silver anymore. And it just leads to some really cool moments as you have Johnny and Chosen, Daniel's 2 rivals from the first 2 movies, partnering up to defend Daniel's honor. And even as they're walking, they're like telling competing stories about how they were awful to Daniel.
I pushed him down a cliff.
I fight him to death.
Oh yeah, what are you, ghost or something?
As well as competing stories about how awesome Daniel is to them.
You know, a few months ago, I saw him take on an entire hockey team. 5-on-1, he beat them all.
I saw him save young girl from typhoon.
And there's just something about that that's just so profound, that these 2 people that were the villains of Daniel's life are now competing to talk up Daniel to them as they're going to go defend him and pick fights at these different dojos and stuff as Terry Silver's trying to take over the valley with his new senseis and buying dojos and stuff like that. They're out to go and stop him.
Adult classes are on Wednesday.
We're not here to take a lesson. We're here to teach you one.
And all kind of crescendos with Amanda, who 2 episodes before was like, Daniel, you're out of here. I'm not doing this with you. Pulls him to Miyagi-Do. And it just has this really emotional thing where Daniel's like, I failed everyone that I've tried to help. And you just have Robbie step in and say, you didn't fail me. And Robbie, kind of the most cynical character for 4 seasons that just doesn't trust anyone, turned on everyone for so long, was just doing such mean-spirited things. And he's come around like, you didn't fail me. Like, here I am. Like, I'm right here. I'm here for you. Let's do this. And that line, as cheesy as it is, as hokey as it is so profound and powerful in that moment with where these characters are after the journey that they've been on. Our runner-up, episode 8, Takai. So this is the episode where Miyagi-Do has figured out Terry Silver's plan. Terry Silver has some judges coming out to determine if Cobra Kai can enter this world tournament. Miyagi-Do shows up to throw their name into the ring, and you get this scenario where it just contrasts the 2 training styles and leading up to this kind of mini tournament to determine which school is the best. And it's interesting to me. It felt like this episode could have been a season finale if structured a little bit differently. If they'd wanted to end the season at this point in time and not have the season be about defeating Silver, but about setting up just this tournament, this could have been a finale. It was kind of interesting the way that kind of worked out. And it could have been 2 episodes as well, one training for it and one the tournament to determine which one's the winner. But you get all that crammed into one episode, plus Tori's reveal at the end to Sam, or going to Sam at the end of it. It's just like, has so many different layers kind of going on here. On the training side, just seeing Miyagi-Do, Eagle Fang working together and their different styles. And finally, they figured out how to train without being competitive with each other. Very cool. But also, more importantly, you have Johnny goes into this whole little mini, sometimes you got to train and go primitive.
Some people use the latest high-tech junk to get there, and some people need to run up a mountain in the snow and yell.
And you got to run up a mountain and just let out and yell. And you're like, and the guy's looking at Johnny like he's a crazy man. And as he says this, the guy goes, Drago! Suddenly you have this amazing moment where they're bonding over Rocky 4. You're like, yes, this is amazing where you're headed with all of this. Loved that moment. And then you get the tournament where showdown at the end where they're having to show their skills. And once again, Terry Silver is bribing off the judges to make sure that they're going to win. And so, and you had this whole deal where Silver trained Kenny to hurt Hawk. And even on that, you have a moment where they're trying to decide who's going to fight. And Johnny's like, man, I don't know. Maybe we'll flip a coin. Maybe we'll do this. And Robbie and Miguel are like, no, Hawk's the reigning champion. He's the one that goes up. And just having those moments where you have this show that's been so much about the tension, the conflict, the melodrama, where the Cobra Kai, Miyagi-Do, Eagle Fang battling it out. And they've resolved their conflicts. So when you have those moments where they're like, no, he's the reigning champion. He beat Robbie fair and square. Of course he's the one that should fight. There's something to that. They're just like, oh, yeah. Not everything has to be a conflict to feel earned and satisfying. And so just even that's like a nice little touch. And then during the fight where clearly the judge has been paid off and isn't giving Sam points she's supposed to have, and they're like, that means you just have to be the most precise, best fighter, and defeats Devin fair and square. Like Tori abandoned it. And you have Tori kind of completing this long journey that she's been on to get onto the right side. She just leaves, checks out, gets out of there. So Sam's easily able to win the fight, be victorious by being precise, even with a judge that's uneven. Both schools are going to be able to get into the tournament. And you just kind of have that moment of victory at the end of it. It's just nice. Like, yes, we did it.
If I could change, and you could change, everybody can change. Now he gets it.
I do.
And it kind of ends with that little cliffhanger where Miguel shows up or Sam shows up at the party. Miguel's smooching with the wrong girl. She runs outside and Tori's there to tell her the truth. And so you even get a great cliffhanger, big reveals, all the stuff, satisfying moments, fights, victories, all the stuff that I want. But coming in at number 1, episode 10, Head of the Snake. And one of the things this show does so well is just building seasons that just have these big, fiery finales, inclusions that are just all payoff. And that's what they did in this episode. All these plot lines, building up Silver as this physical threat, this mastermind, and then they come up with a plan to tear him down, undo his master plan, as well as physically defeat him. What's interesting about this one, while this was like the most satisfying episode, there was just such a great payoff to the whole season, it also did include several things that were like the most ridiculous and the most like, wait a minute, what's kind of going on here? Where the good guys commit multiple felonies in the episode. Kreese fakes his death to escape on the exact day that he would have been released anyway because Silver has been revealed to be the actual person that assaulted Stingray. And so, I just realized my finger's bleeding. Didn't realize that. That's interesting what happens while filming videos about Cobra Kai. Your fingers get so excited they start bleeding. Anyway, there's a few things in there that really bugged me. There was like that as for the season, they pulled the season down, but as an episode, it was like, never mind. This is just too cool. The big thing, Mike Barnes at the end of the last episode kidnapped Daniel and friends. And at the beginning of the episode, Daniel's 3 rivals from the original trilogy team up to go take down Silver. That's awesome. That's awesome. There's no way about it. I'm annoyed that Mike Barnes got knocked out at the beginning of the fight and he didn't do more because the episode could have been even better, even more satisfying. But at the end of the day, the 3 of them team up to go after Terry Silver, and even with Mike Barnes getting knocked out, he still just destroys this guy, smashing him into the wall, leading to then Johnny and Chosen dueling it out with all of these evil senseis, and just a knocked out, brutal fight. The big both of, like I would say, the big highlight, but there's 2 big highlights. You have Chosen and Silver literally fighting with blades as drunken Chosen is not in his full state, but he's gonna make Silver pay for everything that he's done. And he actually gets him down. He's ready to be able to kill him and looks away for just a second and Silver gets out of there. But it's just such a cool fight to like have the stakes be this high, this brutal, actual fights from these grown-ups that are taking this, like this is a fight to the death potentially. And then on the inside, you have Johnny fighting against all these senseis, desperately trying to survive. And you kind of get this moment in it where he gets knocked down and the picture of the new baby is like on the floor and he's like, I have something to fight for. I'm not just fighting against, I'm fighting for. And he just goes all out, just street fighting, whatever it takes to defeat these dudes. And literally people's fingers are getting chopped off in the whole process. Just amazing, amazing stuff. And at the last moment, Mike Barnes rejoins the fight and kind of saves the day just a little bit. So fun. I wish Barnes was more involved in the fight. I'm sure it was a scheduling conflict. I'm sure like he just wasn't available. He couldn't learn the choreography. So all he could do really was like tackle people and throw a couple punches. I'm sure that's what it was. But man, I wish he'd done more in there because it was already so awesome, but it could have been awesomer if they managed to do that. And then at the end of it, even John is like, I did all of this. And Mike Barnes is like, yeah, you did. And you're like literally watching Daniel's enemies come together to battle Daniel's ultimate enemy. So cool. And then, of course, back at the dojo, Cobra Kai, the teenagers broke in to get the files. And now all these fights kind of going on. And you kind of get to the end of it where it's revealed Terry Silver has just been lying this whole time. He's not who these kids thought he was. And they turn on him. And Daniel faces off against him one more time. And finally takes all the lessons he's learned from Terry Silver, from Chosen, from Miyagi, defeats Silver.
Rule number 3. A man can't see, he can't fight.
and Silver is defeated. And it's just like, because they set up an actual enemy, like usually there's kind of a gray, who's right, who's wrong. That's what it was kind of at the beginning, what the show was all about. There's not a clear right and wrong here. But they gave us a legitimate villain who's has a master evil plan that needs to be stopped. And so when he's defeated, when his people turn against him, it's so satisfying. And even Mike Barnes gets a little bit of a happy ending there, in that he stole a extremely expensive piece of art, which would of course be an extreme, very large felony. But potentially he will be able to, rebuild his furniture store with the stolen Rembrandt. But anyways, just as much as it had some of those things that bugged me about the season, I more hold them against the season than I do against the episode, because the episode was just so much fun. Absolute blast. So it comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, I've got way more Cobra Kai content. You can check it out right somewhere around here. Seasons ranked, Karate Kid movies ranked, and I got a character ranking coming tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.